That one moment before the whole world starts asking things of her again. Her hand wraps around the mug, steam rises. The house is still dark. She takes one slow sip and closes her eyes for just a second. That quiet, that warmth. She does it every morning, has for years. Habit or ritual. The first few minutes of a new day that belong entirely to her. What most people don't know is that those quiet minutes might actually be doing something for her brain. Researchers spent 4 decades trying to confirm it. And what they found changed the way I think about something I'd taken completely for granted. Before I get into the science, I want to try something with you. A quick memory exercise right now. It's optional, no pressure. I'm going to say 5 words. Hold on to them. You'll need them at the end of this video. Here they are. Cup, cinnamon, garden, clock, rust. One more time. Cup, cinnamon, garden, clock, rust. Got them? Good. Hold on to those. I had to read this twice when I came across it. A study published in JAMA, one of the most respected medical journals in the world, followed more than 130,000 people for up to 43 years. Not a small sample, not a short window. 43 years of actual human lives being tracked by researchers from Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health, Mass General Brigham, and the Broad Institute. What did they find? People who drank moderate amounts of caffeinated coffee regularly had an 18% lower risk of developing dementia compared to those who didn't. 18%. From something most of us already do before 7 in the morning. And the decaf? It showed no protective effect. The benefit came specifically from the caffeine. The results even held in people with a genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's. Meaning this wasn't just a lifestyle correlation. Something in the caffeine itself appears to matter. Of course, before you make any changes, loop in your doctor, especially if you have heart concerns or sensitivity to caffeine. This is one study in an evolving field, but 43 years of data isn't something to set aside lightly. So what is caffeine doing up there? Your brain produces a molecule naturally called adenosine. Think of it as your body's built-in fatigue signal. From the moment you wake up, adenosine starts accumulating. Eventually, it reaches specific receptors in your neurons, and your brain gets the message, slow down, time to rest. That signal isn't the problem. The problem is what happens when those receptors stay chronically overstimulated, day after day, year after year. The brain starts to change slowly. Signals don't travel as cleanly. Memory begins to slip. And what surprises most people? That process can begin 20 years before any symptoms appear. Caffeine crosses into the brain and blocks those adenosine receptors. Not permanently, not harshly. It fits the receptor and sits there, interrupting the fatigue signal without triggering it. That's a mechanism, not just a correlation. Now here's where it gets counterintuitive. For years, the assumption was that lighter roast coffee was the healthier choice. More of the original plant compounds intact, less processing. It sounds reasonable, but researchers at the Krembil Brain Institute in Toronto took a different approach. They looked at what actually happens to coffee compounds at different roast levels. In lab studies, they found something that shifted how I think about the grocery store coffee aisle. During dark roasting, a compound forms called phenylindanes, and this molecule is unusual. In these lab experiments, it was the only compound tested that blocked both beta amyloid and tau protein, the two main proteins associated with neurodegeneration. Not one, both. And dark roast contains significantly more phenylindanes than light roast. The longer the beans roast, the more forms. Now, this research was conducted in laboratory conditions, not in human clinical trials. So we can't say definitively that drinking dark roast will produce these effects in the body. What we can say is the compound is there, and it's not present in meaningful amounts in lighter roasts. The richer, deeper, sometimes less expensive coffee on your grocery shelf? For brain health specifically, the early science points in its direction. Go check your bag. Light? Medium? Dark? The darker the roast, the more of that compound is present. Even if you're buying the right coffee, there are two things that happen in a lot of kitchens every morning that work quietly against you. The first is milk. Milk is nutritious. That's not the issue. The issue is a protein in milk called casein, which binds to coffee's polyphenols, the compounds responsible for much of its antioxidant activity. When that binding happens, your body absorbs significantly less of the protective benefit. Some research suggests absorption may drop by 30 to 60%. You're still drinking the coffee, you're just getting a fraction of what you think. The second is sugar. And this one connects to something neurologists have been studying for years, the relationship between chronic blood sugar dysregulation and cognitive decline. Insulin is what lets glucose enter brain cells. When that process breaks down, brain cells can't access the fuel they need, even when it's right there. So you choose the right roast. You're doing something genuinely good for your brain. And then you add 2 tablespoons of sugar, which works against the same system you're trying to support. Talk to your doctor about your overall diet, especially if blood sugar is already on your radar. But in terms of what you could shift tomorrow morning, the sugar is worth reconsidering. The answer isn't something you've never heard of. It's 2 things that are probably already in your kitchen. 1 teaspoon of pure cocoa in your dark roast with half a teaspoon of cinnamon. What you end up with is essentially a natural mocha, no sweetener needed, because the cocoa brings its own depth. The first is cinnamon. A study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that 2 specific compounds in cinnamon helped inhibit the toxic tau protein tangles associated with Alzheimer's disease in laboratory studies. If you can find Ceylon cinnamon specifically, it has lower coumarin levels. That makes it a gentler choice for everyday use. A study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that 2 specific compounds in cinnamon helped inhibit the toxic tau protein tangles associated with Alzheimer's disease in laboratory studies. They work by binding to vulnerable sites on the tau protein, helping to protect it from the kind of oxidative stress that leads to clumping. The second is pure cocoa powder. Not a chocolate drink mix, not sweetened cocoa, pure, unsweetened cocoa. Research from Columbia University found that cocoa flavanols increased blood flow to a specific region of the brain called the dentate gyrus, which is tied directly to memory function. Better circulation there tracks with better recall. The tip of the tongue moment that used to resolve instantly, that's the region cocoa is feeding. 1 teaspoon of pure cocoa in your dark roast, with half a teaspoon of cinnamon. What you end up with is essentially a natural mocha. No sweetener needed because the cocoa brings its own depth. I want to tell you about a patient I saw. I'll call him Walter, not his name. He was a civil engineer, sharp, methodical, a man whose whole career was built on precision. He came in because he was forgetting the names of coworkers he'd known for 15 years. One afternoon, he blanked on how to get home for a few seconds. Standing in a parking lot, suddenly uncertain of something he'd done 1,000 times. His MRI showed Fazika's grade 2 changes, significant small vessel damage in the brain. And when we talked through his daily habits, there it was, 5 to 6 cups of light roast coffee every morning. 3 packets of sugar each. We made a few changes, switched to dark roast, cut the sugar entirely, added half a teaspoon of cinnamon and a teaspoon of cocoa to his morning cup. 6 months later, his mocha score went from 23 to 28. He was remembering names again. Same coffee habit, same morning ritual, completely different content in the cup. I'm sharing this not to suggest that everyone will see those results. Every brain is different. Your doctor knows your history. Always bring them into any conversation about what you're changing and why. One more thing worth knowing about. The brain sits behind something called the blood-brain barrier. It's a highly selective filter that keeps most substances in the bloodstream from reaching the brain. That's usually a protective feature. The sound waves cause the bubbles to vibrate, which temporarily opens the barrier just long enough to allow cleanup cells and therapeutic compounds to pass through. No surgery, no incisions. Human trials are already underway, and early safety results are encouraging. This isn't a distant possibility. It's being refined now. Researchers at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center in Toronto are using microbubbles, tiny gas-filled spheres, combined with focused ultrasound. The sound waves cause the bubbles to vibrate, which temporarily opens the barrier just long enough to allow therapeutic compounds to pass through. No surgery, no incisions. Human trials are already underway, and early safety results are encouraging. This isn't a distant possibility. It's being refined now. All right, those 5 words from the beginning. Take a moment if you need it. They were cup, cinnamon, garden, clock, rust. 5 out of 5? That's strong recall under passive listening conditions. All right, those 5 words from the beginning. Take a moment if you need it. They were cup, cinnamon, garden, clock, rust. 3 or 4 is completely normal. Memory under distraction is a different skill than memory with focused attention. Under 3? That's not a verdict on your brain. That's your brain signaling it could use a little more support. And now you have a starting point. Here's the formula. Tomorrow morning, dark roast, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of pure cocoa. Brew them together or stir them in after. That's the whole change. 43 years of data, 2 ingredients, 1 cup. If this shifted how you think about your morning, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Early changes matter most. There's a video on your screen right now about the nighttime habits that quietly erase memory. Habits most people don't even realize they're doing. That one's worth your time next. Take care of yourself. I mean that.